Naomi Carter was a farm girl, quiet, hardworking, and often overlooked, spending her days in the fields. Then one afternoon, three boys decided she was their next target. To them, a black farm girl was easy prey. Mock her, shove her, push her into the mud, certain she'd never fight back. Their laughter rang out, sharp and cruel, as if daring her to resist. But Naomi Carter wasn't just any farm girl. Her late father had trained her in martial arts since childhood, and when their taunts turned violent, they learned the truth. The girl they thought powerless was deadly. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The rooster's crow pierced the morning silence as Naomi Carter's eyes opened to the familiar darkness before dawn. Her small bedroom, with its worn quilt and simple wooden furniture, felt cozy in the early morning chill. She didn't need an alarm clock. Her body knew the rhythm of farm life as naturally as breathing. Pulling on her work boots and a warm flannel shirt, Naomi moved quietly through the old farmhouse, careful not to wake her mother just yet. The wooden floorboards creaked softly beneath her feet, a sound that reminded her of countless mornings just like this one. Outside, the air was crisp and clean. Stars still dotted the sky, though a faint glow on the horizon promised the coming sunrise. Naomi's breath made little clouds in the cool air as she made her way to the chicken coop. The hens clucked softly when she entered, already stirring in anticipation of breakfast. "Morning, ladies," Naomi whispered, spreading feed across the ground. She collected warm eggs from the nesting boxes, placing them carefully in her gathering basket. Each morning routine felt like a meditation. Simple tasks that connected her to the land her family had worked for generations. Moving to the fields, Naomi checked the irrigation lines and adjusted the sprinklers. The soil felt rich and dark between her fingers as she tested its moisture. Their crops weren't fancy, mostly vegetables for the local market, but they were good, honest plants tended with care and knowledge passed down through years of farming. When she heard movement from the house, Naomi knew her mother was up. Angela Carter appeared on the back porch, her gray-streaked hair tied back neatly, wearing her own well-worn work clothes. They exchanged warm smiles as they fell into their familiar morning pattern, working side by side without needing many words. But Naomi had one more morning ritual, one that remained her secret from the outside world. As the sky began to lighten, she slipped into the barn, pulling aside a heavy tarp to reveal the training mats her father had left behind. The worn blue padding still held his scent faintly, a mixture of leather, hay, and the sharp tang of determination. Memories flooded back as Naomi began her warm-up stretches. She could see her father clearly in her mind, tall and strong, demonstrating each move with precision. "Power comes from discipline, not anger," he would say, adjusting her stance with gentle hands. "The strongest oak bends in the wind but never breaks." She moved through her forms with fluid grace, each strike and block perfectly controlled. The barn's morning shadows danced as she practiced, her movements precise and powerful. This was more than exercise. It was connection, remembrance, and preparation all at once. A soft knock on the barn door signaled it was time for breakfast. Naomi quickly covered the mats and wiped her face with a towel. Inside the kitchen, Angela was already setting out plates of eggs and toast. The kitchen was warm and bright, filled with the smell of coffee and the comfort of routine. "You're getting better every day," Angela said quietly, pouring coffee for them both. "Your father would be proud." Naomi nodded, grateful for her mother's understanding. "I remember what he always said about keeping it private." "That's right," Angela agreed, her eyes serious. "These days, people are quick to judge what they don't understand. Your father knew that strength isn't about showing off. It's about knowing when to hold back." They ate together in comfortable silence, the morning sun now fully risen. After cleaning up, they changed into fresh clothes for the market. Naomi helped her mother load crates of vegetables into their old pickup truck. Tomatoes still warm from the vine, crisp lettuce, sweet bell peppers, and more. The produce was arranged carefully in wooden baskets, each item placed to show its best side. These weren't just vegetables. They were the results of their hard work, their connection to the land, their family's pride. Angela checked each basket one final time, making small adjustments with practiced hands. "Ready?" Angela asked, closing the truck's tailgate with a solid thunk. Naomi nodded, climbing into the passenger seat. She had washed the dirt from her hands and changed into clean jeans and a simple blue shirt, but she could still feel the morning's training in her muscles, a secret strength hiding beneath her quiet farmer's daughter exterior. The morning sun beat down on the town square as Naomi and Angela carefully arranged their produce at their usual spot in the farmer's market. Their wooden stand, weathered but sturdy, displayed neat rows of vegetables they'd harvested just hours before. The market buzzed with activity, vendors calling out prices, children running between stalls, and shoppers examining fruits and vegetables with careful eyes. "Good morning, Mrs. Carter," called Mrs. Thompson from the flower stand next door, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Beautiful tomatoes today." "Thank you," Angela replied with practiced politeness, adjusting a basket of bell peppers. Naomi noticed how her mother's shoulders tensed slightly, ready for the usual undercurrent of judgment that came with every market day. Other vendors and customers offered similar greetings, cordial nods to Angela, but swift glances past Naomi, as if she were invisible. Some didn't bother hiding their sideways looks, whispering behind raised hands. Naomi kept her focus on arranging the produce, letting the prejudice roll off her like water, just as her mother had taught her. The morning crowd moved in its usual patterns until a burst of loud laughter cut through the market's gentle murmur. Naomi's stomach tightened as she recognized the sound. 3 boys in red and white varsity jackets approached their stand, taking up too much space as they swaggered between the market stalls. Derek Holloway led the group, his Letterman jacket pristine despite the summer heat. Kyle Turner and Mason Clark flanked him like eager shadows, matching his stride. They stopped directly in front of the Carter's stand, blocking potential customers from approaching. "Well, look who it is," Derek announced, loud enough to draw attention. The dirt girl in her mama's little veggie shop. His eyes swept over their carefully arranged produce with exaggerated disdain. Naomi felt her mother step closer, their shoulders touching briefly, a silent reminder to stay calm. She kept her eyes down, focusing on a perfectly ripe tomato as she adjusted its position in the basket. "What's wrong, dirt girl?" Kyle taunted, leaning on the table until it creaked. "Too good to look at us? Think you're better than everyone else just 'cause you can grow some vegetables?" Mason snickered, his thin face twisted in a smirk. "Probably thinks she's real special. But we all know what you really are." He drew out the last word with deliberate meaning, making several nearby shoppers shift uncomfortably and look away. "Please, move along, boys," Angela said firmly but quietly. "We're trying to conduct business here." Derek's smile turned cruel. "Business? Is that what you call this?" He gestured at their stand with theatrical disgust. "Looks more like playing in the mud to me." He moved closer, deliberately bumping the table with his hip. The wooden crate of tomatoes teetered precariously. Naomi reached to steady it, but Derek was faster. With a quick kick to the crate's base, he sent it crashing to the ground. Ripe tomatoes burst across the pavement, their red pulp spreading like blood on the concrete. "Oops," Derek said with false innocence. "Guess they were too ripe." Naomi's hands clenched into fists at her sides. She could feel the power in her muscles, the knowledge of exactly how to take Derek down humming beneath her skin. Her father's training flashed through her mind. The perfect strike points, the swift movements that could leave him gasping in the dirt. Naomi. Her mother's voice was barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of years of warnings and wisdom. Mason stepped forward, hawking and spitting deliberately near Naomi's feet. The glob of saliva landed inches from her work boots. Kyle's laughter rang out sharp and mean, drawing more stares from the growing crowd of onlookers. "Better clean that up, dirt girl," Mason sneered. "Wouldn't want to mess up your fancy marketplace." Naomi's breath came in controlled measures as she knelt to begin picking up the ruined tomatoes. Each piece she gathered felt like a hot coal in her hands, her fury building with every second. She could feel her pulse pounding in her temples, could sense the exact distance to Derek's smirking face, could calculate the precise force needed to wipe that smile away forever. The boys continued their laughter, making it echo across the market square as they strutted away. Naomi's hands shook as she picked up another broken tomato, juice running between her fingers like the anger running through her veins. She focused on her breathing, just as her father had taught her during training. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Each breath a choice between peace and violence. Around them, the market slowly returned to its normal rhythm, though people still stole glances at the mess and the quiet dignity with which mother and daughter cleaned it up. The red stains on the pavement would fade, but the humiliation and rage burned bright in Naomi's chest as she gathered the last pieces of their ruined produce. The evening sun cast long shadows across the Carter farm as Naomi and Angela worked side by side in companionable silence. They moved through their usual routine, feeding animals, checking fences, and storing equipment. But the weight of the morning's humiliation hung heavy between them. Every time Naomi closed her eyes, she saw those tomatoes bursting on the concrete, heard the echo of cruel laughter. In the kitchen, they sat down to a simple supper of cornbread and bean soup. The old wooden table, scarred with years of family meals, held memories of happier times when Naomi's father would tell stories that made them laugh until their sides hurt. Now, the quiet was broken only by the soft clink of spoons against bowls. "You showed great restraint today," Angela finally said, her voice gentle but firm. "Your father would be proud." Naomi stirred her soup, watching the steam rise. "They think we're weak because we don't fight back. Silence isn't weakness, baby." Angela reached across the table to touch her daughter's hand. "Sometimes it's the strongest choice we can make. Your daddy used to say that true power isn't about throwing the first punch. It's about knowing when to throw it at all. But how long do we have to take it?" Naomi's voice cracked slightly. "They destroyed our produce, Mama. That's money we needed." "I know." Angela's eyes held a mixture of steel and sorrow. "But we're still here, aren't we? Still standing. Still farming this land that's been in our family for generations. That's not weakness. That's endurance." After helping clean up from supper, Naomi changed into her training clothes, loose black pants and a fitted tank top that had been her father's old workout shirt. The familiar scent of him still clung faintly to the fabric, growing fainter with each washing but never quite disappearing. The barn door creaked as she entered, switching on the single overhead light. The space transformed in the evening hours from a working barn to her private dojo. Training mats covered one corner, surrounded by practice dummies and various pieces of equipment her father had collected over the years. Everything was carefully maintained, hidden away during the day behind stacked hay bales. Naomi began her warm-up routine, moving through the basic forms her father had drilled into her since she could walk. Each stance flowed into the next with liquid precision, her breathing steady and controlled. But tonight, the movements weren't enough to contain the storm inside her. She moved faster, adding complex combinations her father had only begun to teach her before his death. Her hands struck invisible targets with devastating accuracy, feet pivoting and sweeping in patterns that would have made most martial artists dizzy. Each movement was perfect, honed through thousands of repetitions in the quiet hours before dawn and after dusk. A wooden board sat propped between two concrete blocks, her father's old braking station. Naomi settled into a horse stance, focusing her energy just as he'd taught her. But instead of the standard straight punch he'd shown her, she executed a spinning back kick that shattered the board with a sharp crack that echoed through the barn. The broken pieces hadn't hit the ground before she was moving again, flowing through advanced kata that she'd developed herself, pushing beyond what her father had shown her. Her body moved with impossible speed and grace, each strike precise enough to shatter bones, each block solid enough to stop a truck. In the doorway, Angela watched silently, her heart swelling with both pride and fear. Her daughter had surpassed even her father's considerable skills, showing a natural talent that bordered on supernatural. Every day since his passing, Naomi had trained relentlessly, turning grief into power, fear into precision. What had started as a way to feel close to her father had transformed her into something extraordinary. Naomi finished a particularly complex sequence with a perfectly executed butterfly kick that would have seemed impossible for someone who spent their days doing hard farm labor. Her chest heaved with exertion, sweat darkening her tank top, but her eyes burned with fierce determination. Walking to the wall where her father's photo hung, him in his military uniform, proud and strong, Naomi bowed deeply. The gesture was full of respect and love, but also carried the weight of promise. Straightening up, she touched the frame gently, her voice barely above a whisper, but full of conviction. "I'll protect us, no matter what." Naomi's shoes crunched on the gravel as she walked home from school, the afternoon sun warming her face. The dirt road wound between towering oak trees, their leaves casting dancing shadows on the dusty path. Her backpack felt heavy after a long day of classes, but her steps were light. She'd aced her biology test, and for a moment, she let herself enjoy the simple pleasure of knowing her hard work had paid off. The peaceful moment shattered as three familiar figures stepped out from behind a thick oak tree. Derek Holloway's varsity jacket gleamed red and white in the sunlight, his smirk ugly and confident. Kyle Turner and Mason Clark flanked him, spreading out to block the narrow road. "Well, look who it is," Derek drawled, his voice dripping with fake sweetness. "The dirty little farm girl who thinks she's too good to say hello at the market." Naomi's grip tightened on her backpack strap. She kept her face neutral, remembering her father's teachings about staying calm in the face of threats. The woods stretched deep on either side of the road, and no other students were in sight. "Move aside," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the anger burning in her chest. Kyle barked out a harsh laugh. "Or what? You'll throw some tomatoes at us?" "Maybe she'll cry to her mommy," Mason added with a sneer. "Oh, wait, she's too busy playing in the dirt to care." They moved closer, forming a tight circle around her. Derek reached out suddenly and shoved her hard. Naomi stumbled backward, her feet sliding in the loose dirt. Another push from behind, Mason this time, sent her sprawling into a muddy patch beside the road. Her white shirt was instantly stained brown, her hands coated in wet earth. The boys laughed, high-fiving each other as if they'd accomplished something impressive by ganging up on a single girl. "Look at her now," Derek crowed, "right where she belongs, in the mud with the other." He spat out a racial slur that made Naomi's blood boil. She started to push herself up, but Kyle's foot pressed down on her backpack, pinning her. He taunted. "Not until you beg us to let you go." "Come on, say please, masters." Naomi's fingers dug into the mud, every muscle in her body coiled tight. Years of training screamed through her veins, begging to be unleashed. Her father's voice echoed in her mind. "Know when to fight." "What's wrong?" Mason jeered. Can't talk with a mouthful of dirt? Kyle lifted his foot and grabbed her arm roughly, yanking her to her knees. Maybe we need to teach her some manners. His hand raised high, ready to deliver a slap. Time seemed to slow. Naomi watched Kyle's hand descend, saw the cruel anticipation in his eyes. In that split second, she made her choice. This was the moment to fight. Her hand shot up with lightning speed, catching Kyle's wrist an inch from her face. His eyes widened in shock as she squeezed, not enough to break bones, but enough to make him gasp in pain. "What the?" he started, but Naomi was already moving. She rose in one fluid motion, using Kyle's momentum against him. A quick twist of his arm sent him stumbling forward. Her leg swept out, catching his ankle, and he crashed face first into the mud with a surprised yelp. Mason lunged for her, but Naomi was ready. She grabbed his outstretched arm, stepped inside his guard, and executed a perfect hip throw. He flew over her shoulder, landing hard on his back with a whoosh of expelled air. Derek stood frozen, his mouth hanging open as his friends sprawled in the dirt. His swagger vanished, replaced by confusion and fear. He tried to back away, but Naomi moved faster than he could process. Her foot hooked behind his knee, a quick push to his chest, and he joined his friends on the ground. The three boys lay groaning in the mud, their pristine varsity jackets now filthy, their pride shattered. Naomi stood over them, her stance perfectly balanced, ready for any further attacks. But they just stared up at her, their faces masks of disbelief. "Listen carefully," she said, her voice cold and clear. "Don't mistake silence for weakness. I've been quiet because I chose to be, not because I had to be. Touch me again, and I won't be so gentle." Kyle tried to push himself up, but slipped back into the mud. Mason remained flat on his back, wheezing. Derek's face had turned an interesting shade of red, humiliation warring with fear in his eyes. Naomi brushed some mud from her shirt, straightened her backpack, and stepped carefully around their sprawled forms. Her posture was perfect as she walked away, each step measured and confident. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. The sounds of their confused groaning told her everything she needed to know. The kitchen was quiet except for the soft clink of forks against plates. Naomi pushed her mashed potatoes around, waiting for the right moment to tell her mother about the afternoon's events. Angela noticed her daughter's unusual silence and set down her fork. "Something's troubling you," Angela said. It wasn't a question. Naomi took a deep breath. There was an incident today, on the dirt road near Miller's Woods. Angela's shoulders tensed. "What kind of incident?" "Derek Holloway and his friends." Naomi's voice stayed steady as she described the ambush, the mud, the racial slur, and Kyle's attempted slap. When she got to the part about defending herself, her mother's face grew increasingly worried. "Oh, Naomi," Angela sighed, rubbing her temples. "Did anyone else see?" "No, just us." They were alone. Angela pushed back from the table and walked to the window, staring out at the darkening fields. "Those boys, especially Derek Holloway, they're not just any bullies. Their families have power in this town." "I couldn't just let them hit me, Mom," Naomi protested. "Dad always said—" "Your father also said to choose your battles wisely." Angela turned back to face her daughter. "Derek's father, Richard Holloway, he's been trying to buy our land for years, even before your father passed." She shook her head. "That man doesn't take well to being told no, and he certainly won't take kindly to his son being humiliated by—" She trailed off. "By a black girl?" Naomi finished quietly. "By anyone." Angela returned to the table, reaching across to squeeze Naomi's hand. "But yes, that makes it worse in their eyes. These people, when they're hurt, they don't just get mad, they get even. And they have the money and connections to make life very difficult for folks like us. Across town, in the Holloway mansion, Derek sat stiffly on an expensive leather couch, while his father paced the study. Richard Holloway's footsteps echoed off the hardwood floors as he moved back and forth, his polished shoes clicking with each step. "Let me understand this clearly," Richard said, his voice dangerously calm. "You and your friends were beaten up by Angela Carter's daughter, the farm girl?" Derek's face flushed red. She knew some kind of karate or something. We didn't expect—" "Of course you didn't expect," Richard snapped. "You never expect anything because you never think." He stopped pacing and loomed over his son. "Do you have any idea how this makes us look? The son of Richard Holloway? Sprawled in the dirt because of a teenage girl?" Derek shrunk deeper into the couch. "I'm sorry, Dad. We'll get her back, I swear. You'll what? Get thrown around again?" Richard's lip curled in disgust. But then something shifted in his expression. He walked to his desk and sat down, drumming his fingers on the polished wood. "Actually, maybe this is exactly what we needed." Derek looked up, confused. "What do you mean?" "That land the Carters live on. Prime real estate, right at the edge of town. Perfect for my new development project." Richard's voice took on a calculating tone. "I've been trying to buy it for years, but Angela Carter's too stubborn. Maybe it's time to show her that holding out isn't in her best interest." Understanding dawned on Derek's face. "You want us to scare them?" "I want you to make them understand that defiance has consequences." Richard opened his desk drawer and pulled out a thick envelope. "If she wants a fight, give her one. Here's some cash. Get creative. Just make sure nothing leads back to us directly." Derek took the envelope, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Yes, sir." "And son?" Richard's voice hardened. "Don't disappoint me again." Back at the Carter farm, Naomi sat on the front porch, wrapped in her father's old cardigan against the evening chill. The stars were coming out, tiny pinpricks of light in the darkening sky. Crickets chirped in the fields, and somewhere in the distance, an owl called. She traced her fingers over a worn spot on the porch railing where her father used to rest his coffee cup during their morning talks. The wood was smooth from years of the same gesture, like a physical memory of him. The farm stretched out before her, the barn's solid silhouette, the neat rows of crops, the old oak tree where she'd first learned to punch without hurting her thumb. Every inch of this land held meaning, held history. Her great-grandfather had bought it when most black folks couldn't own property. Her grandmother had preserved it through drought and recession. Her father had modernized it while keeping its soul intact. Now it was up to her and her mother to protect it. The evening breeze carried the scent of fresh-turned earth and approaching rain. Naomi inhaled deeply, letting the familiar smells center her. Her victory today had felt good. Right, even. But her mother's warnings echoed in her mind, mixing with the memory of Richard Holloway's sleek car cruising past their property, his calculating eyes surveying their fields like he already owned them. The fight at the dirt road suddenly felt small, like the first raindrop before a storm. She'd stood up to schoolyard bullies, but she could feel larger forces gathering, invisible but powerful, like storm clouds on the horizon. The crickets kept chirping, the stars kept shining, and Naomi kept her vigil on the porch, surrounded by the land that 3 generations of Carters had called home. Dawn broke over the Carter farm, painting the sky in soft pinks and oranges. Naomi pulled on her work boots, heading out to check the irrigation system before school. The morning dew soaked her jeans as she walked through the rows of vegetables, but something wasn't right. Water pooled where it shouldn't, creating muddy patches in the carefully tended soil. Following the main irrigation line, she found the problem. Clean cuts marked the black tubing every few feet, water spurting from each gash. These weren't normal wear and tear or animal damage. The cuts were too precise, too intentional. "Mom!" Naomi called out, her voice tight with anger. "Come look at this!" Angela hurried over, still wiping her hands on her apron. She took one look at the damaged pipes, and her face fell. 20 years of farming had taught her to recognize sabotage when she saw it. "Those tubes cost nearly $500, Angela said quietly, kneeling to examine one of the cuts. "And without water, the tomatoes won't last 3 days in this heat." Naomi's hands clenched into fists. It was them. Derek and his friends. "We can't prove that." Angela stood up, brushing dirt from her knees. "And accusations without proof will only make things worse." They worked together in silence, using duct tape for temporary repairs. The tape wouldn't hold for long, but it was all they could afford right now. Each piece Naomi wrapped around the pipes felt like a bandage on a deeper wound. At school, the changes were subtle, but unmistakable. Teachers who had once smiled warmly now gave her brief, cautious nods. Students stepped aside when she walked down the hallway, not out of respect, but fear. She caught fragments of whispers. "Attacked 3 guys. Knows some kind of kung fu. Totally crazy." In chemistry, her lab partner asked to switch groups. Mrs. Reynolds, who had always praised Naomi's work, hesitated before agreeing. The new partner, a freshman boy, knocked over his beaker when Naomi reached for a test tube. During lunch, Naomi sat alone at her usual table until Lila Thompson slid into the seat across from her, dark ponytail swinging. Lila had been her best friend since 3rd grade, when they bonded over being the only girls who preferred climbing trees to playing house. "Don't let them get to you," Lila said, unwrapping her sandwich. "People always talk, but they'll find something new to gossip about next week." Naomi picked at her food. "It's not just talk. Someone vandalized our irrigation system this morning." Lila's eyes widened. "Are you sure it was them? Who else would it be?" Naomi's voice came out sharper than intended, and she immediately regretted it when Lila flinched. "Sorry, I'm just tired." "I get it." Lila reached across the table, squeezing Naomi's hand. "But you're stronger than they are. Not just physically. You're better than them in every way that matters." A group of students walked past, their conversation dropping to whispers. One girl clutched her books tighter to her chest, as if Naomi might suddenly attack. "Am I, though?" Naomi asked quietly. "Yesterday, when I fought back, I became exactly what they always said I was. The angry, violent black girl." "That's not true," Lila protested. "You defended yourself. There's nothing wrong with that." But Naomi could see doubt flicker across her friend's face. Even Lila, who knew her better than almost anyone, couldn't quite hide her unease. The rest of the school day dragged on endlessly. In English class, they were discussing To Kill a Mockingbird, and Naomi felt every eye turned to her during discussions of racism and injustice. Her usual thoughtful contributions dried up in her throat. After school, she walked home alone, taking the long way to avoid the dirt road where yesterday's fight had happened. The afternoon sun beat down on her shoulders, as heavy as the stares and whispers she'd endured all day. That night, Naomi lay in bed, unable to sleep. She got up and moved to her window seat, drawing her knees to her chest. The stars stretched across the sky, countless points of light that had witnessed generations of struggle and survival on this land. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. "Fighting isn't about winning or losing. It's about standing up for what's right. But what if standing up only made things worse?" The damaged irrigation system would cost money they didn't have. The whispers at school could hurt her chances at the scholarship she desperately needed. Her mother worked so hard to keep this farm running, to give Naomi a chance at a better future. And now, all that was at risk. The stars offered no answers. They just kept shining, distant and indifferent, while Naomi wrestled with questions that had no easy solutions. She pressed her forehead against the cool glass, watching her breath fog the window, wondering if her father had ever felt this lost, this uncertain about the price of standing up for himself. The next morning, Naomi stood at the front of Mr. Daniels's history class, her heart pounding but her voice steady as she presented her research on the civil rights movement. She had spent weeks preparing, diving deep into stories of peaceful resistance and the power of standing firm in the face of hatred. The real strength of the movement, she explained, gesturing to the images projected behind her, wasn't just in big marches or famous speeches. It was in everyday people refusing to back down, refusing to accept being treated as less than human. Mr. Daniels leaned forward at his desk, nodding encouragingly. Unlike other teachers who now avoided her eyes, he seemed genuinely interested in what she had to say. Many of these activists were just teenagers, Naomi continued, her confidence growing. They faced fire hoses, police dogs, and angry mobs, but they kept showing up. They kept demanding better. She clicked to her final slide, showing a photo of young protesters being arrested. They knew that standing up for themselves might make things harder in the short term, but they did it anyway, because staying silent meant accepting defeat. When she finished, the class was quiet. A few students shifted uncomfortably in their seats, perhaps seeing parallels they'd rather ignore. But, Mr. Daniels broke into applause, and others slowly joined in. "Excellent work, Miss Carter," he said, standing up. "Your analysis shows remarkable insight, particularly in connecting historical events to modern-day implications." As other students began packing up their books, Mr. Daniels called out, "Naomi, could you stay for a moment?" She approached his desk, wondering if she'd been too pointed in her presentation. But Mr. Daniels was smiling as he pulled out a thick envelope from his drawer. "I've been teaching for 20 years, he said, "and I rarely see students with your level of critical thinking and dedication." He handed her the envelope. "These are application materials for the Mitchell Foundation Scholarship. Full ride to any state university." Naomi's hands trembled slightly as she took the envelope. "Sir, I don't know what to say." "Say you'll apply." He leaned back in his chair, his kind eyes serious. "Your GPA is well above their requirements, and this presentation proves you have the academic skills they're looking for." "But," Naomi glanced down at the glossy pamphlet showing smiling students on a pristine campus, "with everything that's happened—" "Listen," Mr. Daniels lowered his voice, "I know things are difficult right now. Small towns can be resistant to change, but you have gifts that shouldn't be wasted here. This scholarship could be your ticket to something bigger." For the first time, Naomi allowed herself to imagine it, walking across a college campus, surrounded by people who judged her by her mind, rather than her skin color or background. No more whispers in hallways, no more sabotaged equipment, no more having to hold back who she really was. "The deadline's in 2 months, Mr. Daniels continued. "I'd be happy to write your recommendation letter. You could study history, law, education, anything you want." "What about the farm?" Naomi asked, though her heart was already racing with possibilities. "My mom needs me." "Your mother wants what's best for you," he said gently. "Talk to her about it. And remember, getting an education doesn't mean abandoning your roots. It means growing strong enough to protect them better." Naomi carefully tucked the envelope into her backpack. "Thank you, Mr. Daniels." "Really?" After class, she found Lila waiting in the hallway. Her friend's eyes lit up at Naomi's unusually bright expression. "What happened in there?" Lila asked as they walked toward their lockers. "You're practically glowing." Naomi pulled out the scholarship pamphlet, showing Lila the photos of tree-lined walkways and modern laboratories. "Mr. Daniels thinks I could get a full ride to college." "Naomi!" Lila squealed, drawing curious looks from passing students. "That's amazing! You totally deserve it." They headed out of the school building together, Naomi explaining the scholarship details while Lila asked excited questions about dorm life and college parties. The afternoon sun felt warmer somehow, more promising than threatening. "Just think," Lila said. "In a year we could both be out of here. Me at community college, you at university. But we'll visit each other all the time, right?" "Every weekend," Naomi promised, though they both knew it was an exaggeration. She clutched the pamphlet tighter, allowing herself to embrace the hope it represented. For the first time in days, a genuine smile spread across her face as they walked home together. The scholarship pamphlet in her hand felt like a key, unlocking a door she hadn't dared approach before. Maybe there was a way forward that didn't require either fighting or surrendering, a path that led to something better than just survival. The familiar streets of their small town seemed different now, less like a cage and more like a starting point. Naomi's steps felt lighter, her shoulders straighter, as she walked beside her best friend, both of them dreaming of futures bigger than anyone in this town had imagined for them. Naomi was walking home from school, her mind still full of college dreams, when she heard running footsteps behind her. She turned to see Lila sprinting toward her, face streaked with tears. "Naomi!" Lila gasped, stumbling to a stop. "They've got my backpack, Derek and the others, by the woods path." Her voice broke. "They said they'd wait for you there." Cold anger replaced Naomi's peaceful mood. "Are you hurt?" "They pushed me around, but—" Lila wiped her eyes. "They said worse things would happen if I didn't get you." Naomi's jaw tightened. She handed Lila her own backpack. "Go to my house. Tell my mom what's happening." "No!" Lila grabbed her arm. "They've got weapons, Naomi. I saw them. You can't go alone." "I'll be fine." Naomi squeezed her friend's hand. "Trust me." She jogged toward the wooded path, her father's training mantras running through her head. "Stay calm. Watch your surroundings. Control the fight." The dirt path curved through thick trees, usually peaceful at this hour. Now it felt like walking into a trap. Naomi slowed her pace, scanning the shadows between trunks. She heard them before she saw them, snickering, the scrape of metal on bark. Derek, Kyle, and Mason stepped out from behind trees, spreading out to block her path. "Look who showed up," Derek drawled, swinging a heavy chain in lazy circles. "The Karate Kid!" Kyle gripped a thick stick like a baseball bat. Mason flicked open a pocket knife, the blade catching sunlight. "Let me guess," Naomi said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Your daddy bought you those toys?" Derek's smirk faltered. "Shut up. You think you're so tough? Let's see how tough you are against this." He snapped the chain like a whip. Naomi settled into a subtle fighting stance, feet planted firmly. 3 guys with weapons against 1 girl. Real brave. "You asked for this," Kyle snarled, "making us look bad, acting better than us." "Last chance," Mason added, pointing his knife. "Apologize, and maybe we just rough you up a little." Naomi took a slow breath, remembering her father's words. When fighting multiple opponents, make them get in each other's way. Derek lunged first, chain whistling through the air. Naomi ducked and spun, letting the chain wrap around a tree trunk. Before he could yank it free, she drove her elbow into his ribs. Kyle charged with his stick raised. Naomi grabbed Derek's shoulder and pulled, sending him stumbling into Kyle's path. The stick caught Derek's arm instead of Naomi's head. "Watch it!" Derek shouted, clutching his arm. Mason slashed with his knife. Naomi deflected his wrist with her forearm, then swept his legs. He fell hard, the knife spinning away into dead leaves. Kyle swung the stick again. Naomi caught it mid-swing, using his momentum to pull him off balance. Her knee found his stomach, doubling him over. Derek had untangled his chain and attacked again, more wildly now. Naomi sidestepped, letting the chain's weight throw him forward. Her palm strike to his chest sent him sprawling. Mason scrambled for his knife. Naomi's kick sent it skittering further into the woods. She blocked his desperate punch and answered with 3 rapid strikes. Shoulder, solar plexus, knee. He dropped, gasping. Kyle tried to grab her from behind. Naomi used his grip against him, throwing him over her hip. He landed hard beside Mason, the stick rolling away. Derek charged with a roar, chain raised high. Naomi met his attack head-on, stepping inside his guard. Her strikes were precise, devastating. Throat, kidney, knee. The chain fell as he crumpled. In seconds, all 3 boys lay groaning in the dirt. Naomi stood over them, breathing hard but controlled. "If you ever come near me or Lila again," she said quietly, "I won't hold back next time." She kicked their weapons deep into the underbrush, then walked back up the path. Her hands shook slightly as adrenaline faded, but her steps were steady. Lila waited at the curve in the path, eyes wide. "Are you okay?" "I heard fighting." "I'm fine." Naomi took her friend's arm. "Let's go home." They walked in silence for a moment, leaves crunching under their feet. Lila glanced back toward the sounds of the boys struggling to their feet. "They really had weapons," Lila whispered. "They could have killed you. They could have tried." Naomi's voice was grim. "But they don't know what real strength is. They think it comes from chains and knives. Where does it really come from?" Naomi thought of her father's lessons, her mother's quiet resilience, Mr. Daniels's encouragement, and Lila's own loyal friendship. "From knowing what you're fighting for," she answered, "and from never backing down when it matters." They walked on together, leaving the woods and their defeated attackers behind. Both girls were exhausted, but they held their heads high as they headed for the safety of home. The screen door creaked as Naomi and Lila entered the farmhouse kitchen. Angela Carter stood at the sink, her back rigid with tension. She turned slowly, taking in their dusty clothes and tired faces. "What happened?" she demanded, drying her hands on her apron. "Lila came running in here talking about weapons?" Naomi sank into a kitchen chair. "Derek and his friends tried to jump me on the woods path. They had a chain, a stick, and a knife." Angela's face went pale. She gripped the counter edge. "Lord have mercy. Are you hurt?" "I'm fine, Mama. They didn't touch me." Naomi's voice was steady. "I handled it." "Handled it?" Angela's voice rose. "They came at you with weapons. We need to call the police right now." Lila spoke up from where she sat beside Naomi. "I saw everything, Mrs. Carter. I could tell them what happened." Angela reached for the phone, then hesitated. "Sheriff Thompson's boy plays football with Derek, and Richard Holloway donated that new patrol car last year." Her hand dropped. "They might not see it our way." "Especially since I fought back," Naomi added quietly. 3 rich white boys against 1 black girl. Who do you think they'll believe?" Angela's shoulders slumped. She moved to the stove where a pot of stew had been simmering. "At least eat something. You both look worn out." She ladled generous portions into bowls, adding thick slices of homemade bread. The girls ate hungrily, while Angela paced, pausing occasionally to peer out the windows at the deepening dusk. "I should drive you home soon, Lila," she said. "Your parents will worry." "Can't she stay?" Naomi asked. "Just for tonight?" "I don't want her walking home alone after what happened." Angela nodded. "I'll call your mama, honey. Explain you're helping with morning chores." Lila smiled gratefully. The kitchen felt safe and warm, filled with the rich smell of stew and the soft click of spoons against bowls. For a moment, they could almost forget the violence of the afternoon. "I really thought they'd leave us alone after last time," Naomi said, breaking the peaceful silence. "When I showed them, I could fight back." "Some people just can't stand being shown up," Lila replied, "especially not by someone they look down on." Angela set a pitcher of sweet tea on the table. Pride makes fools do dangerous things, and the Holloways have more pride than sense. But I won, Naomi insisted. I beat all three of them, even with their weapons. They know they can't hurt me now. Baby girl. Angela's voice was gentle. Sometimes winning one fight just means they'll come back harder next time. With more help, or worse weapons, or… She trailed off, not wanting to voice darker possibilities. The sunset painted the kitchen walls orange through the window. Angela lit the overhead lamp, moths already gathering around its glow. The familiar routine felt strange against the tension in the air. "What do we do?" Lila asked softly. "We stay alert," Angela answered. "We watch each other's backs, and we document everything. Take pictures of any damage they do, write down every threat." She straightened her spine. "If we can't trust the law to protect us, we'll build our own case." Naomi pushed her empty bowl away. "I'm not sorry I fought them. I'm not saying you should be." Angela touched her daughter's shoulder. "You protected yourself and your friend. Your daddy would be proud." She sighed. "I just wish you didn't have to." The three women sat together as night settled over the farm. Crickets chirped outside, and somewhere an owl called. The peaceful sounds felt like a lie against their worried thoughts. Meanwhile, across town in the Holloway mansion, Derek slouched in an expensive leather armchair, holding an ice pack to his ribs. His father stood at the study window, a glass of scotch in his manicured hand. "She made us look like idiots," Derek snarled. "Again! With Kyle and Mason right there watching." Richard Holloway didn't turn from the window. "You let a teenage girl overpower three boys with weapons. Idiots might be generous. She knows kung fu or something. What were we supposed to do? Think ahead. Plan better. Use your resources." Richard's voice was cold. "But instead, you let your temper lead you into another embarrassing defeat." Derek shifted, wincing. "So what now? We can't let her get away with this." Richard finally turned, his face hard in the study's dim light. "Don't worry," he said. "By the time I'm done, that girl won't have a farm to defend." The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Naomi sat in the hard plastic chair outside Principal Warner's office. Her hands were folded tightly in her lap, fighting to stay still. The secretary kept glancing at her with poorly hidden suspicion. The door opened. "Miss Carter!" Principal Warner's voice was clipped. "Come in." Naomi's heart pounded as she entered the office. Derek, Kyle, and Mason sat in a row of chairs against the wall, their parents hovering behind them protectively. Richard Holloway stood near the window, his expensive suit a stark contrast to the tired school furniture. "Have a seat." Principal Warner gestured to a lone chair facing his desk. Naomi felt the weight of every hostile stare as she sat down. "These boys and their parents have filed a serious complaint." Warner shuffled some papers. "They claim you violently attacked Derek, Kyle, and Mason without provocation 2 days ago." "That's not true," Naomi said, her voice steady despite her racing pulse. "They threatened my friend Lila. They had weapons." "Young lady," Richard Holloway cut in smoothly, "3 witnesses say otherwise, and given your previous incidents of violence—" "Previous incidents?" Naomi's confusion showed on her face. Warner cleared his throat. "We have reports of you assaulting these same students on the dirt road last week. And now this attack in the woods." He shook his head. "The school board takes violence very seriously." "They attacked me both times." Naomi's voice rose. "I was defending myself." "A likely story," Mrs. Kyle sneered. "Look at my son's bruises. No girl could do that unless she was the aggressor." Naomi looked desperately at the principal. "Please, I can explain." "I'm sorry, Miss Carter." Warner's tone suggested he wasn't sorry at all. "But, given the severity of these accusations and the consistent witness statements, I have no choice but to suspend you pending further investigation." The room spun. Suspended? But my scholarship application. Should have thought of that before you started picking fights, Derek muttered, smirking. 2-week suspension, effective immediately. Warner stamped a form. Your mother has been called to pick you up. Naomi walked out in a daze, past the smug faces of her accusers. In the hallway, she found her mother waiting, worry etched on her features. Baby, what happened? Before Naomi could answer, heavy boots echoed on the linoleum. 2 sheriff's deputies approached, their hands resting casually on their belts. Mrs. Carter? The taller deputy spoke. We need to ask your daughter some questions about these assault allegations. Angela stepped between them and Naomi. Not without a lawyer present. Ma'am, we're just following up on a complaint. Then you can follow up through proper channels. Angela's voice was steel. Come on, Naomi. They drove home in tense silence. As they turned onto the farm's dirt road, Naomi noticed unusual movement near the chicken coop. Mama, something's wrong. They found the coop's door hanging open, the lock broken. Inside, scattered feathers told a gruesome story. Several chickens lay dead, their necks twisted. Who would do this? Naomi whispered, though she knew the answer. Angela's face was grim. Same ones who cut our irrigation lines, I expect. She touched a dead hen gently. These were our best layers. They spent the next hour burying the chickens. As they worked, Naomi's phone buzzed with text messages from Lila. Everyone at school's talking about your suspension. They're saying you're dangerous. The scholarship committee heard about it. Naomi's hands shook as she read. Everything was falling apart. Her chance at college, her reputation, her family's livelihood, all crumbling because she dared to defend herself. She looked around their small farm, really seeing how vulnerable it was. The old fence that couldn't keep determined intruders out. The equipment they couldn't afford to replace if it was damaged again. The remaining chickens that might be next. Inside the house, she found the scholarship application on her desk, half completed. The words blurred as tears filled her eyes. Distinguished academic record seemed meaningless now. Who would believe in her potential when everyone thought she was just a violent troublemaker? The sun was setting when Angela found her daughter curled up on her bed, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Naomi clutched her father's old photo to her chest. I thought I was doing the right thing, she choked out. Standing up to them like Daddy taught me. But I've ruined everything. Angela stood in the doorway, her own heart breaking as she watched her daughter's dreams shatter. What have I done? Naomi whispered, her voice small and lost. What have I done? Her mother could only watch helplessly, unable to shield her child from this pain, unable to fight the system that was crushing them both. The last rays of sunlight faded, leaving them in growing darkness. Morning sunlight crept through the kitchen windows, casting long shadows across the worn wooden table. Naomi sat motionless, staring at the untouched plate of eggs and toast before her. Dark circles under her eyes betrayed a sleepless night. Angela moved quietly around the kitchen, the familiar sounds of dishes clinking and coffee brewing doing nothing to lift the heavy silence. She watched her daughter from the corner of her eye, noting how Naomi's shoulders slumped under an invisible weight. You need to eat something, Angela said softly, sliding into the chair across from her daughter. When Naomi didn't respond, she reached across and gently touched her hand. Your father always said an empty stomach makes for clouded thinking. Naomi pulled her hand away, wrapping her arms around herself. What's the point? They've already won. The suspension, the sheriff, the farm. Her voice cracked. Everything Daddy worked for is falling apart, and it's my fault. Angela stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. She walked to the living room and returned with a worn leather box. Opening it, she pulled out a faded photograph of her late husband in his military uniform, standing proud and tall. "Your father didn't teach you martial arts so you could win applause," Angela said, placing the photo on the table between them. "He taught you to protect what matters." Naomi traced her father's face with her finger. "But I failed at that too." "The chickens are not your failure," Angela cut in firmly. "That's on the cowards who sneak around in the dark." She leaned forward, her voice intense. "Your daddy knew what it meant to be strong in a world that wanted him weak. He didn't fight for glory. He fought to protect his family, his dignity, his piece of earth." The morning light caught the silver chain around Angela's neck. Her wedding ring hung there, too precious to risk wearing while working the farm. "When we bought this land, people said we didn't belong here, said we wouldn't last a season." A small smile crossed her face. "Your father just kept working, kept building, kept proving them wrong with every harvest." Naomi looked up, really seeing her mother's face, the quiet determination there, the years of standing tall against prejudice and hardship. "How did you both do it? Keep going when everything was against you?" "We had something worth fighting for." Angela reached across the table and took Naomi's hand again. This time, her daughter didn't pull away. "And so do you. This isn't just about those boys anymore, or even the suspension. This is about our home, our legacy." Something shifted in Naomi's eyes. She glanced out the window at their fields, the morning dew still clinging to the crops they'd planted together. The barn where she'd learned her father's art. The soil that held generations of their family's sweat and dreams. "Richard Holloway thinks he can chase us off our land," Angela continued. "Thinks he can break us with fear and lies." She squeezed Naomi's hand. "But he doesn't know what your father knew. The true strength isn't in making others afraid. It's in protecting what you love, no matter the cost." Naomi's back straightened slowly, like a flower turning toward the sun. She picked up her fork and took a bite of eggs, then another. Angela watched with quiet approval as her daughter cleared her plate. Standing up, Naomi gathered the dishes and washed them methodically, her movements becoming more purposeful with each passing moment. When she finished, she walked to the window and stared out at the barn, her father's training ground. "Mama," she said softly, "I understand now. Daddy didn't just teach me how to fight. He taught me what to fight for." Angela nodded, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Then honor his teachings. Not with anger, but with purpose." Naomi turned from the window, her face set with new determination. Without another word, she walked out of the kitchen and headed straight for the barn. The heavy wooden doors creaked open, familiar scents of hay and leather washing over her. She rolled out the old training mats, their surface worn smooth by years of practice. Her father's voice seemed to echo in the space. "Power without control is nothing but violence, but control without power? That's just surrender." Naomi began her warm-up routine, each movement precise and measured. No more tears, no more doubt. This was not about proving herself to bullies or winning approval from a prejudiced town. This was about protecting what mattered: her mother, their land, their right to exist without fear. The morning light streamed through the barn's high windows as Naomi moved through increasingly complex forms. Her strikes cut the air with quiet intensity, each step grounded in purpose rather than anger. This would not end in silence, but neither would it end in defeat. Naomi woke with the sun over the next 2 days, her muscles aching but her mind clearer than ever. She moved through her farm chores with renewed purpose, each physical task becoming part of her training. While collecting eggs, she practiced her deep breathing. While hauling water buckets, she worked on her balance and grip strength. In the barn between tasks, she drilled her techniques relentlessly. The old punching bag swayed as she delivered precise combinations: jab, cross, hook, each strike flowing into the next. Her father's voice guided her movements. Power comes from the ground up. Root yourself like an oak tree. She practiced throws using a heavy burlap sack filled with straw, perfecting the way her hips turned, how her hands gripped and pulled. Every movement had to become instinct, muscle memory she could call upon without thinking. When the sack split open, she stitched it closed and started again. Angela watched from the farmhouse as Naomi moved through her forms in the yard, her shadow stretching long across the grass. She noticed how her daughter's movements had changed. Less flash, more substance. Each stance was solid, each strike efficient. This wasn't about showing off anymore. This was preparation. At the general store in town, whispers followed Angela as she bought supplies. She caught fragments of conversations that stopped when people noticed her. Did you hear about the Carter girl? Took down 3 boys twice her size. Maybe those Holloway boys aren't as tough as they think. Mrs. Jenkins, who'd lived in town all her life, actually smiled at Angela for the first time in years. She slipped an extra loaf of bread into Angela's bag and whispered, "Your girl's got spirit. Don't let them break it." The local diner was buzzing with quiet talk. Some folks remembered Naomi's father, how he'd carried himself with dignity despite the sideways looks and muttered comments. Now his daughter was showing the same steel in her spine. Back at the farm, Naomi didn't know about these whispers of support. She focused on her training, pushing herself harder each hour. She practiced blocking techniques against imaginary attackers, moving faster and faster until sweat soaked her clothes. When her arms trembled from exhaustion, she switched to footwork drills, dancing across the barn floor in complex patterns. During breaks, she studied her father's old martial arts manuals, worn pages filled with diagrams and notes in his careful handwriting. Some techniques she'd never mastered before suddenly made sense, as if her body had finally caught up to the knowledge. "Keep your center low," she read in his familiar script. "Let attacks flow past you like water around a stone." She worked on her defensive movements, learning to redirect force rather than meet it head-on. Each bruise and callus was a lesson written on her skin. The second evening, Lila visited briefly, bringing homework from the classes Naomi was missing. She watched her friend train with wide eyes. "People are talking about you," Lila said softly. "Not all bad either. Jenny Martinez told me her brother said Derek deserved what he got." Naomi just nodded, continuing her drills. The town's opinion didn't matter anymore. She had to be ready for whatever came next. As night fell on the second day, Naomi remained in the barn long after her mother had gone to bed. The only sound was her steady breathing and the rhythmic thud of her fists against the heavy bag. Her knuckles had split hours ago, leaving small red smears on the leather, but she barely noticed the pain. Jab, cross, hook. The combinations flew faster and faster. Each impact sent shock waves up her arms, but she welcomed the sensation. This was what preparation felt like, pushing past comfort, past fatigue, past doubt. The dried blood on her knuckles cracked and fresh drops appeared. But still she struck. This wasn't about anger anymore. Each punch was a promise to protect what mattered. Each drop of blood was a reminder of what she was willing to give. The heavy bag swung on its chain, keeping time like a metronome as Naomi worked. She didn't notice the hours passing, didn't feel the growing ache in her shoulders. There was only the next punch, the next combination, the next lesson written in sweat and determination. Her father had always said that training wasn't about the beginning or the end, it was about the moments in between, when nobody was watching. Those were the moments that built character, that forged strength from raw potential. The moon rose high over the barn, its light filtering through the gaps in the wooden walls. Still Naomi trained, her shadow dancing on the floor as she moved. Her bleeding knuckles left dark patterns on the bag, each mark a testament to her resolve. This wasn't just practice anymore. This was transformation, one punch at a time. The full moon cast long shadows across the farmyard as Naomi lay in bed, too restless to sleep. Something felt wrong. The night was too quiet. Even the crickets had fallen silent. Then she heard it. The soft crunch of gravel under multiple boots, whispered voices carrying through her open window. Her heart jumped, but her hands remained steady as she grabbed the battery-powered lantern from her bedside table. "Around back," a voice hissed. "Near the barn." Naomi recognized Derek's voice, but there were deeper voices too. Men's voices. She slipped downstairs in bare feet, moving silently as her father had taught her. Through the kitchen window she caught the gleam of metal in moonlight, gasoline cans swinging at their sides. Her mouth went dry. They meant to burn down the barn, the heart of the farm, where they stored their equipment and feed, where she'd trained all these years. Without it, they'd lose everything. Naomi eased open the back door, thankful she'd oiled the hinges just yesterday. The cool grass bent under her feet as she moved into the yard. She counted the shadows: Derek, Kyle, and Mason, plus 3 larger figures she didn't recognize. Grown men with hard faces and harder eyes. Richard's hired muscle, no doubt. They were nearly at the barn when Naomi clicked on her lantern. Light flooded the yard, catching them in the act. Derek with a gas can raised, Kyle holding matches, the others freezing like startled deer. "This is my home," Naomi's voice rang out clear and strong across the yard. "You'll never take it." For a moment, nobody moved. Then one of the men laughed. An ugly sound. "Little girl playing tough," he sneered. "Go back to bed before you get hurt." Naomi set down her lantern and settled into a fighting stance. "Last warning! Leave now!" They came at her all at once, just as she'd trained for. The first man rushed straight in, telegraphing a wild punch. Naomi slipped past it like water around a stone, grabbing his extended arm. She turned with his momentum, using his own weight to send him flying into Kyle and Mason. Derek swung the gas can at her head. She ducked and swept his legs, the can clattering away as he hit the dirt. The second man tried to grab her from behind, but Naomi was already moving. She drove an elbow into his solar plexus, then hooked her ankle behind his knee. He went down hard. The third man had a knife. Moonlight glinted off the blade as he slashed at her. Naomi weaved back, letting the attack cut empty air. When he lunged again, she caught his wrist and twisted, using the Aikido move she'd practiced countless times. The knife fell from nerveless fingers as she turned his arm into a lever, driving him face first into the ground. Kyle and Mason had untangled themselves from the first man. They came at her together, but their movements were clumsy with fear now. Naomi blocked Kyle's punch and used his shoulder as a springboard, kicking Mason in the chest. As Kyle tried to recover, she dropped and rolled, taking his feet out from under him. The first hired man was back up, blood running from his nose. He pulled brass knuckles from his pocket, but Naomi was done playing defensive. She exploded forward with a combination her father had drilled into her: jab to the throat, knee to the stomach, elbow to the temple. He dropped like a stone. Derek scrambled for the knife on the ground. Naomi reached him first, stamping on his hand. He howled in pain as she yanked him up by his collar. "Look at me," she commanded. When he tried to look away, she shook him. "Look at what you tried to do. Look at what it got you." The second hired man was limping toward her. Without releasing Derek, Naomi snapped a kick into the man's knee. He went down screaming, clutching his leg. The third man had apparently seen enough. He staggered to his feet and ran, disappearing into the darkness. The one with the brass knuckles followed, holding his head as he stumbled away. Mason tried to help Kyle up, But Naomi's voice stopped them. "Stay down." They froze, then slowly sank back to the ground. The yard fell quiet except for heavy breathing and pained groans. Naomi stood tall among the fallen figures, her stance solid as an oak tree. She hadn't even broken a sweat. "Your father can't protect you here," she told Derek, who was still in her grip. "Your money can't help you. This is my land, my home. Remember this night. Remember how it feels to be helpless against someone stronger than you." She released him, and he collapsed, all his arrogance finally broken. Kyle and Mason stared at their fallen leader, their own confidence shattered. The moon continued its arc across the sky, illuminating the aftermath. 6 attackers had come to burn down her barn. Now they lay scattered and beaten, their plan in ruins, their pride destroyed. Naomi retrieved her lantern, its light catching the tears on Derek's face as he curled into himself, finally understanding what true strength looked like. Dawn was breaking when Angela Carter stepped onto the porch, phone in hand. She surveyed the aftermath of the night's violence, scattered gasoline cans, patches of torn grass, and dark stains in the dirt that might have been blood. "I'm calling Sheriff Matthews," she announced, her voice firm. "This has gone far enough." Naomi nodded, pulling out her own phone. "Wait, Mom. There's something you need to hear first." She pressed play. Derek's voice filled the morning air, bragging to his friends. "Dad says once we scare them enough, they'll have to sell. That farm's going to be worth millions once he develops it." Another recording started. This time it was Richard Holloway's cold, calculated tones. "Break whatever you have to break. Kill their livestock if you need to. I want those women off that land, and I don't care how it happens." Angela's eyes widened. "When did you—" "I started recording everything after the suspension," Naomi explained. "Every threat, every conversation. I knew they'd try something big eventually. I just didn't know it would be this." Angela squeezed her daughter's shoulder, pride mixing with concern on her face. "Make the call," Naomi said. "And call Channel 7 News too. It's time everyone saw the truth." Within an hour, police cars and news vans crunched up their gravel driveway. Sheriff Matthews tried to look disinterested, but his face changed when Naomi played the recordings. His deputy was already taking photos of the gasoline cans and the signs of struggle. "These men," Naomi pointed to the hired muscle who had fled, "they work for Richard Holloway. They came with Derek and his friends to burn down our barn." The sheriff's comfortable relationship with the Holloways wrestled visibly with his duty to the law. But with reporters watching and evidence mounting, he had no choice. Deputies were dispatched to the Holloway estate. News crews set up their cameras as more evidence emerged. Lila arrived, still in her pajamas, ready to testify about the attack in the woods. Other students came forward too, sharing cell phone videos of Derek's bullying and harassment. By mid-morning, Richard Holloway was being led out of his mansion in handcuffs, his face twisted with rage. Derek, Kyle, and Mason were taken to the police station for questioning, their parents trailing behind, looking shell-shocked. The school superintendent called Angela personally, apologizing for Naomi's suspension. "It will be removed from her record immediately," she promised, "and the boys will face expulsion hearings this week." Reporters gathered on the farmhouse porch, microphones ready. Naomi stood before them, her mother at her side. The morning sun caught her face, highlighting the quiet strength there. No longer hidden, no longer denied. "I defended my home," she stated clearly into the cameras. "I defended my family's land against people who thought their money and influence put them above the law. They thought we would stay quiet. They thought we would give up." She gestured to the fields around them, the land her father had worked, the soil she had tended every morning of her life. "This farm isn't just property to us. It's our heritage, our home." and I will always protect it. Questions flew from the reporters about the martial arts, about the recordings, about years of harassment. Naomi answered each one with calm dignity, her voice steady and sure. My father taught me that strength isn't about domination, she explained. It's about standing firm when others try to break you. It's about protecting what matters, not destroying what others have built. The cameras captured every word as Naomi finally stepped fully into the light, no longer the quiet farm girl others had dismissed. She stood tall on her family's porch, her mother's hand in hers, surrounded by supporters who had found their own courage in her example. Local live coverage cut to footage of Richard Holloway's arrest, then back to the Carter farm. The reporters pressed closer, hungry for more details about the night's dramatic events. But Naomi had said what needed saying. She had shown who she truly was, not through words, but through actions. Standing there in the morning light, she was exactly who her father had raised her to be, a protector, a warrior, and above all, a Carter, rooted deep in the land that would now remain their own. The autumn chill hung in the morning air as Naomi walked through the high school doors, her backpack slung over one shoulder. The hallways felt different now, no longer a gauntlet to be navigated, but just corridors lined with lockers and morning drowsy students. Faces turned as she passed. Some nodded respectfully, others quickly looked away. The fear and scorn that had followed her for years had transformed into something else, a mix of admiration and cautious awareness. They all knew now what she was capable of, but they'd also seen her restraint, her dignity in victory. Lila met her at her locker, grinning broadly. "Welcome back, officially," she said, hugging Naomi tight. "The place wasn't the same without you." "Thanks," Naomi replied, returning the hug. "It feels strange, being back like this." Mr. Daniels approached them, a folder in his hand. "Ms. Carter, do you have a moment?" He held out the folder. "Your scholarship application has been fast-tracked. The review board was quite impressed with your academic record, and given recent events," he smiled. "Well, let's just say they're very interested in having you as part of their program." Naomi took the folder, her hands steady, but her heart racing. Inside were forms, recommendations, and a letter promising a full ride to the State University's agricultural science program. Her dream of higher education, once threatened by false accusations, was now within reach. In class, she noticed the empty seats where Derek and his friends had once sat. Their expulsion hearings had been quick and decisive, backed by overwhelming evidence. Kyle had actually apologized, breaking down in tears during his testimony about Richard Holloway's manipulation. Mason and Derek remained defiant, but it didn't matter anymore. Their power was gone. At lunch, Naomi sat with Lila in the cafeteria, no longer relegated to the corner table. Other students drifted over, hesitantly at first, then with growing confidence. They asked about the farm, about her training, about her plans for college. She answered honestly but modestly, remembering her father's teachings about humility. After school, Naomi drove home along the familiar dirt roads. The family truck bumped over potholes she knew by heart, past fields preparing for winter. The afternoon sun caught the metal of new no trespassing signs, legal protection for their land, courtesy of the district attorney's office. The farmhouse came into view, strong and steady as ever. The barn's red paint was fresh, a gift from neighbors who'd finally found the courage to show their support. Even the old windmill creaked with renewed purpose, as if the whole property knew it was truly safe at last. Angela was in the kitchen, sorting through mail. "How was school?" she asked, as Naomi entered. "Different," Naomi replied, setting down her backpack. "Better." She pulled out the scholarship folder. "Mr. Daniels gave me this." Her mother read through the papers, tears welling in her eyes. "Your father would be so proud," she whispered. "Not just of this," she waved the scholarship letter, "but of how you handled everything. You protected our home without losing yourself." They shared a quiet dinner, discussing plans for the farm's future. With Richard Holloway facing charges for conspiracy and property destruction, his development schemes had crumbled. The Carter land would stay agricultural, protected by new legal covenants that Angela had insisted on as part of the settlement. "We should expand the vegetable plots in spring," Naomi suggested, helping with the dishes. "Maybe add that greenhouse we talked about." "One step at a time," Angela smiled. "But yes, we can build now. Plan for the future, without looking over our shoulders." Later, Naomi walked the property's perimeter, touching the familiar fences, checking the repaired equipment. The evening air carried the scent of autumn leaves and distant wood smoke. Crickets chirped their evening symphony as stars began to peek through the darkening sky. She thought about Richard Holloway, sitting in jail awaiting trial. His influence had evaporated once people saw him for what he was. The sheriff's department had launched an internal investigation into their own conduct, and the school board had implemented new anti-bullying policies. Change had come to their small town, slow but steady as the seasons, not through violence or revenge, but through truth exposed and justice served. Naomi had shown them all that strength could exist alongside mercy, that fighting back didn't mean destroying others. In the growing dark, she practiced her forms, kicks, strikes, and blocks flowing together in the patterns her father had taught her. Each movement was a reminder of his wisdom, each stance grounded in the earth he had loved. The martial arts were no longer just self-defense. They were a connection to her heritage, a way to honor both her father's teachings and her own path forward. Dawn was just breaking when Naomi stepped into the barnyard the next morning. Mist clung to the grass as she began her training routine, her movements precise and powerful. She flowed through the familiar patterns, adding new variations she had developed during those long nights of preparation. Angela watched from the porch, coffee cup in hand, pride evident in her gentle smile. Her daughter moved like morning light across their fields, graceful yet unstoppable, peaceful yet powerful. In every gesture was the promise of protection. In every stance, the certainty of someone who knew exactly who she was and what she stood for. I hope you enjoyed that story. Please like the video and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.